For a Jewish worshiper, a walk to God's holy hill was exciting and jubilant. But with the stunning, grandiose architecture of Herod's temple in view, the journey must have been filled with amazement and awe. A pilgrimage up to the temple and a visit inside its beautiful courts and buildings would have been a journey to remember and a walk beyond compare. So what did a Jewish man or woman experience as they made their way up to the sacred temple? And what did they encounter when they arrived at the summit of God's holy hill? To answer those questions, we are exploring Jerusalem. We've recreated the temple, and we are telling again the story of Israel's sacred house of worship. So follow along with us as we investigate the mysteries of the temple both then and now. At the time of Christ, if you had been a Jew on a religious pilgrimage to Jerusalem, you might have begun your ascent to God's holy hill at the Pool of Siloam near the southern end of the city of David. This water reservoir, estimated to be over an acre in size, was fed by the waters of Gihon, which twisted and turned their way down through Hezekiah's tunnel. The Pool of Siloam was in existence during the time of Christ, dates all the way back to the Hasmonean period. It was actually discovered in 2004 when workers in repairing a water main found the remains or a portion of this pool. Archaeologists determined that the reservoir had most likely been used as a major water source for the citizens of Jerusalem, but others suggest that it was a large purification mikveh and used for important religious celebrations. If you'd lived here during the first century and come down to the Pool of Siloam, you might have seen families and great reunion, celebrations. If you'd been here during the Feast of the Tabernacle, you might have seen the priest coming down from the temple with their golden vessels, collecting water and then taking it back up to the temple and pouring it out on the altar as sort of a drink offering. You might have also seen tears of a man in utter joy who wiped the mud off of his eyes, who had been placed there by Jesus, being able to see for the first time, right here at the Pool of Siloam. Whatever its main purpose, the Pool of Siloam would have been a historic and majestic location to begin your pilgrimage to the temple. Leaving the Pool of Siloam, you would be faced with a half-mile uphill journey toward the Temple Mount, walking on the precisely hewn paving stones constructed over the top of the Central Valley drainage system. Walking up this highly engineered thoroughfare would have taken you past numerous houses and shops, where you would have sold a clay jar, some food, or perhaps a trinket to have money for the temple tax, or to purchase an animal for an offering. Pilgrim's Way, as it has come to be called, was only recently excavated, but today it still lies beneath centuries of debris and soil accumulated overhead. Where the street has been exposed, evidence of shops and businesses can still be seen in the traces of burn marks from the temple's destruction and in the rubble along its streets near the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount. With money in hand, your ascent would have brought you to the southern steps and up to the main entrance of the temple complex. Joining thousands of worshipers, a pilgrim would have witnessed families festively greeting one another and heard the boisterous cacophony of celebratory songs and sounds similar to those still being heard today near the Western Wall when families gather for celebrations or for a bar mitzvah, marking the transition of a 13-year-old boy's adoption of the religious obligations of Judaism. Before ascending the southern steps, It was customary to ritualistically cleanse yourself in one of the many mikvaot located in the area, over 50 of which have been discovered near the Temple Mount. Water for these mikvaot, along with the enormous amount needed for the daily cleansing and washing required inside the temple, came from area water sources and was siphoned through numerous aqueducts and into underground cisterns. Some 49 of these water reservoirs were discovered and surveyed by Edward Robinson during the 19th century, and they reveal that there was ample water available to fill the many mikvaot and for the priests to perform their numerous duties at the temple. Having been properly purified in a mikvah, you would then reverently ascend the steps to the double gate. The entrance for most pilgrims seemed to have been right up through this section, up into the double gate, up what we call the southern steps, which we're really only seeing about half the width of them that existed during the time of Christ. Reaching the final step, your quest led you to the double gate and onto an elevated street at the likely location of the gate called Beautiful. Somewhere on the southern steps, or along this elevated street, the paralyzed man of Acts chapter 3 may have lain, asking you for money or for food. This double gate entrance was simple in its appearance, but its underground passage was exquisite. The ceilings were crafted with shallow spherical domes and carved and painted with various geometric designs and floral patterns. It was a truly beautiful gate, remnants of which still exist today beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Entering the double gate and emerging from the tunnel would have brought you to an open-air plaza where in the distance you would have immediately noticed a stone wall from the Hasmonean period that had once been the temple's exterior wall. And in the distance, the upper portion of the marble-covered sanctuary, which Josephus said looked like a mountain covered with snow and a fiery splendor at the rising of the sun. To your left and right, lining the perimeter, were the beautifully adorned colonnaded porticos and the likely place for Peter's sermon at Solomon's porch recorded in Acts chapter 3. The porches provided relief from the sun and protection from the rain. The crevices and supporting beams of these porches might also have been home to the birds and swallows, just as the birds still find their home in portions of the western wall today. They are vivid reminders of what the psalmist said in utilizing this imagery of the swallows making their nest at the temple to describe the comfort and peace he felt when visiting the house of God. Sadly, those porches were destroyed, and little remains which testifies to their existence. On the southern end of the temple stood the magnificent royal Stoa, which Josephus says was a structure more noteworthy than any under the sun. It was designed for commerce and special activities, and likely the usual place for money changers and temple vendors to erect their tables and shops. This possible business district of the temple was designed with a pervasive Greek and Roman style architecture, similar to the reconstructed Stoa found in Athens, built originally during the 2nd century BC. The Stoa in Jerusalem was built with 27 feet high columns crowned with Corinthian-style capitals, columns so large that Josephus wrote that if 3 men with outstretched arms gathered around a single column, they would have barely been able to touch fingers. Before moving toward the temple's inner courts, a curious interest would have taken you to the Stoa's southeast corner to experience one of the highest points in the complex and what many consider to be its pinnacle. The pinnacle was the location where Satan took Jesus to be tested during one of his temptations, and from this incredible height, you could have seen Bethlehem to the south, the mountains of Moab to the east, and the beautiful mountains of Olives just across the valley. Before exiting the Stoa, imagine yourself purchasing a sacrificial animal or dove, hearing the sounds of bleating lambs, coins clinking among the money changers, and sellers loudly hawking their wares. Cradling your sacrificial offering to your chest, you would have proceeded north toward the temple courts and into an area cordoned for Gentiles. Access to this court was available through several different gates or formal entrances, but you may have chosen to enter into what was considered to be the Huldah gates, so named in honor of the prophetess and heroine of the Old Testament, who was respected and honored by King Josiah. Passing through the Huldah gates brought you to the court of the Gentiles. To prevent non-Jews from proceeding further, a stone barrier known as the soreg, or balustrade, was erected and most likely stood where the wall surrounding the Dome of the Rock exists today. The wall during the time of Jesus contained numerous inscriptions which read, "No man of another nation to enter in the fence and enclosure around the temple, and whoever is caught will have himself to blame that his death ensues." Two of these inscriptions were discovered some 1900 years later by John Iliff and Charles Clermont-Ganneau, and are a testimony to the temple's existence and to Paul's reference in the book of Ephesians to a wall of separation. The court of the Gentiles is also the likely location where Jesus drove out the merchants and money changers. After passing through the balustrade, you would have finally reached your ultimate destination, the inner courts of this grand complex. The long-awaited moment had arrived. You had left the pool of Siloam, walked the pilgrim's way, immersed yourself in the mikvaot, entered through the double gate, purchased a sacrifice in the royal Stoa, walked along the porticos, and now you were about to cross the barrier and experience the most thrilling moment of the entire journey. You were coming to where God meets with His creation and where atonement for sin could be found. What then would you encounter next? What lay beyond the court of Israel and into a place where only the priests were allowed to go? Join with us in our next episode as we answer those questions and come near to the presence of God and approach His holy dwelling place, while we continue our quest to unveil the mysteries of the sacred temple both then and now.